Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out Forever Porty. Now, Porty refers to the hometown of where I'm from, which is Portland, Jamaica. It's a very beautiful place, very peaceful, very serene. And if you haven't visited Portland, Jamaica, check it out. Check it out. Um, Today, I would like to talk about a topic that can be considered a big topic for some people. And I would like to remind, if you have never seen my first video on this channel, the purpose of my channel is to share my opinions, my insights, perspectives. The goal is to bring healing and to bring unity. Now, I would like to talk about using um, ways to describe ourselves that I don't believe are very helpful to ourselves. So, in the concept of race, the racial system that was created in the past is a concept that was created based on misinformation, prejudices, biases, hatred, superiority complex, etc. And a lot of those effects and results, consequences, and systems are being dismantled, which is wonderful. And there still is work to be done, even though work has been done, but there still is work that continues to be done. But I do think that there's one area of dismantling the system that people should consider, and that is using colorized, what I refer to as colorized terms to describe ourselves, specifically referring to ourselves as black or white or brown. Now, in the past, there were some additional terms that people used to describe themselves. Some of you may be old enough to know, and some of you may not. But the colors yellow and red were also terms that were in use. And those terms are no longer used. However, the colors white, brown, and black are still in use. When I asked people why is it that two colors were gotten rid of, but three colors remain? Most times people actually don't really have an answer as to why. I have heard some people say, well, that's because they realized nobody was yellow and nobody was red, or they realized that these terms were specifically derogatory. They were specifically derogatory versus the colors of white, black, and brown that are trying to be more descriptive versus being derogatory. And I can say, okay, I hear that, but I also feel like sometimes the truth is more than one thing, right? So I do think in the past, when those terms were used for yellow and red, I do believe that they were used with the intent of being derogatory. And I also do believe that some people used it simultaneously to be derogatory and also because they believe it was describing people. And then so it begs the question, when people use the term white, black, and brown, is that just being descriptive? Well, how can we argue and say it is being descriptive when it doesn't actually describe people's skin tones? So we're being descriptive, but we forgot our colors. I mean, colors is something that you learn from when you were in probably kindergarten. So why is it that when it comes to colors being on a human being, we have a whole new color system that does not match the color system that we learned in kindergarten? So these would be some of the responses I have to people that say, oh, it's just being descriptive. But it's inaccurately descriptive. And when we realize that things are inaccurately describing things, we have the ability to change, right? We have seen this happen in recent years. People are saying, this is inaccurate. This information that is listed here in this monument or this library or this museum or this posting, this is inaccurate. We need to make it accurate, right? Accuracy. Accuracy, facts, those are all systems that are central to Western ideology. Why is it, though, that when it comes on to describing people, we're so addicted to being inaccurate and to not using facts? Why? Why is there a bit of incongruence in our belief system and what it is that we actually do? Now, for some people who identify as Black, when I say this to them, they have a hard time processing it, and I do feel like it triggers something in their nervous system. And what some people will say to me is, oh, well, I'm Black and I'm proud. And I think some people feel as though when I talk to them about this, that I'm telling them that they should not be proud about being Black. And what I want to say to that is, be proud to be Black if that is your identity that you are choosing. And I get it. For some people, what they're saying is, I am choosing to identify as Black and I am kind of regenerating this word. I am not taking it on as, oh, I'm Black, I'm less than. I'm taking it on as I'm Black and I'm proud, right? Which is, I think, why those two kind of came together. I'm Black and I'm proud versus I'm Black and I'm, not proud. So for some people, that is how they conceptualize it when I speak to them about losing language or not using language to describe yourself as Black. Because the story has been, you're Black and you're proud. So then if you don't call yourself Black, that means that you're not calling yourself Black because you're not proud to be Black. I think that's the pieces that people put together. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that people should not be proud of who they are. But who are you? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, who are you? The racial system is a system that is not something you self identify with, it's a system that is forced upon you. So if you believe that you are embracing this identity, have you ever thought about what identity you would choose of your own? We live in a world now where people choose their own identities very openly and very freely. Not 100% across the board in every culture, in every region, in every continent. But that concept is really opening up. I think a part of it is living in the age that we live in, the time, the consciousness that we live in as a collective. We are being more open to unique self expression. So we know that we can choose our own identities. But race is not something that you choose, race is something that's chosen for you. And you will see that if you ever go to fill out a form and they ask you, what is your race? And you tell them, I don't know. They would just look at you like, how can you not know your race? The same way that they would look at you and, as if they asked you for your name and you said you didn't know. People expect you to know your race the same way as they expect you to know your name, but they're not the same thing. Race is a system that was created based on a lot of prejudice and bias and hatred and misunderstanding and superiority complex and also inferiority complex. So why would you choose to put a label or an identity into your subconscious and communicate that identity to other people when that word came from a dark place in the human soul? Why would you perpetuate that dark place that those words came from Why do you perpetuate that? It's a tough question, but it's a tough question for all of us to think of. It's a question for me to think of. Why would I want to perpetuate that? Why do I want to participate in that? Now, some people say, well, if I don't identify as Black, what will I call myself? And I say that is a great question. That is a great question. Think about it for yourself. I cannot tell you what to call yourself. That's not for me. That's not for me. That's something for you to answer. I will give an example though, because for some people, their mind just draws the biggest blank. When you remove the racial system, it's like, the brain that is short circuiting and you have smoke coming out, and you're just like, I have no idea, I have no idea, I have no idea. How about you identify yourself as a person of African descent? That's one thought. You could say, well, I'm not just African, I have other ethnicities. Okay, a person of African and European descent. A person of African, European, and Asian descent. We do not need to use this one word color, black, brown, white, to describe ourselves. Once again, these terms were created from a place of not high vibration. And that's the nicest way I can say what I really want to say. Why do we want to further and perpetuate those energies within ourselves, within our siblings, within our children, within our friends, within our partners? Why? Why? And also, something that I personally think is contradictory is when I see people, they want to do away with the racial system. They want to do away with systematic racism. Systematic racism, absolutely, I agree with that. Systematic racism must go. Individual racism must go. Systematic racism must go, regardless of who is doing the racism. But yet, and however, the language that was created to describe and to perpetuate the racial system, we don't want to kill that. We want to kill the racial system, but we don't want to get rid of the language that causes it to flourish. We can't have it both ways. I don't think we can. I don't think we can. And once again, there are people that will say, well, when I'm using black, I'm using it from a place of empowerment because I know who I am and I know I'm not inferior. Great. I think it's great that you know that. But if you know that you're empowered, why can you not also empower yourself to use a term of your choosing to describe yourself? Why do we not have that power? And I do feel like for some people, when you ask that question, we realize, oh, we don't feel like we have that power. We are not empowered to make this change. We are not empowered to change the racial system. So, how are you saying that you are empowered? You're using this word as a form of empowerment, but you don't have the power to identify yourself. That's deep. That's deep. And I'm talking and I'm listening to myself also. And it's a challenge. Now, some people feel as though, once again, race is just a part of human life. Race has to be here, just like the sun has to be in the sky, race has to be here. How can we conceptualize ourselves without race? Well, it's a faulty construct. I mean, think of faulty belief systems think of any faulty belief system that you believe is faulty and ask yourself, what would life be without that faulty belief system? You probably would think it could be better without that faulty belief system. The same thing with race. It's a faulty belief system. And it's a belief system because it's something you have to, sorry, trying to make this brighter. It's a faulty belief system because it's something you have to believe in because it's not a truth. And I really think we should be careful when we use words like I am. I am refers to things that are truth about us, not things necessarily that are fact. Yes, they can be things that are fact, like I have black hair. Maybe tomorrow I could have purple hair. So the fact that I have black hair naturally, but I can change that to a different color. But there are truths about me, like I am a source of love, I'm a source of peace, I'm a creator. Those are truths. If you say I'm black, is that a truth about you? If you identify by aligning yourself every day, every minute, by using words, to identify yourself or even other people, you are perpetuating the very system that you say that you don't want to have. You are perpetuating the very same system that you say oppresses you or disadvantages you. It's not your fault. The system was put in place and we were told to accept it as truth. But it's not truth. It's not truth. It's like being a West Indian. I'm from Jamaica. I'm a West Indian. Why? Because some person went looking for India and thought they found it. And so I'm West Indian. We know the facts about that. We now know where India is. It's not near the West Indies at all. But we don't change those facts. And if we were to change that, I don't think it would be such a big deal. People would be like, okay, yeah, not the most accurate information. But for some reason, when you talk to people about getting rid of the concept of race, that tends to stir up some things within people. So, what I would like to say is that as we live in this life, let us ask ourselves, who am I? Who would I like to be? How can I identify myself? Think about that first before just feeling as if you have to accept what the racial system puts on you, because the racial system benefits some people and disadvantages others. That's literally why it was created. And anybody that just says, oh, it's just a classification system. Oh, you mean like when scientists go to classify animals or plant species? It's just classification. There's no bias in there, there's no prejudice, there's no hate. Okay, that's not what race is. There is bias, there's prejudice, there's hate. And because it is a social construct, it needs to be believed by everyone a part of that social construct. It needs to be upheld, it needs to be perpetuated, it needs to be spread all over the world as the concept of race has been spread all over the world. Now, people say to me, well, people would just find a way to discriminate against people in society. So getting rid of using racialized terminology is not that big of a deal because people would just discriminate for some other thing, right? Maybe you're rich, you're poor, you're tall, you're short, you know, your standard of beauty, etc., etc. This is true. All human and people groups do have some form of hierarchy. I don't think I've ever heard of a people group that does not have any hierarchy. So this is a fact, I would say. I don't know if I can say it is truth, but I'll say it is a fact of people groups that I have learned about and I have studied all across the world. But when I ask people and say, okay, people are going to discriminate against people and categorize people based on whatever other categories you can think of, why do we need one more category of race? Let's say people will discriminate and say, oh, you are wealthier than some other person. Okay, you have the haves and you have the have nots. Why do we need one more category of race? Why? And no one can answer that. Many of us accept race because we just feel like we were born into it, and we're born into it, so it has to be so. It doesn't have to be so. It continues to be so. And I just challenge people, rethink, ask yourself, why do I accept that this system has to be here? When they ask, what race are you? Why do you have to answer one race? There is only one race. There's the human race. That's the only one race that there is. Check every box. Every box that's on there. What race are you? Check all of them. Fun experiment. What race are you? Check 2 boxes for 2 different races that you think when people see you, they can't believe it is you. And see how people are impacted by that. Now, some people do have a fear. I've heard people say, oh, well, if we stop, identifying who we are, then we will not receive the support that we need. And I understand that concern. But my thing is this, for example, earlier I gave an example of a way to identify, which is a person of African descent. So if there is a system to help Black people, there can also be a system to help people of African descent. Technically, people of African descent would be everybody because everybody is descendants of African descent. But to make it less complicated, there can still be help. There can still be support. As long as there continue to be biases and prejudices and injustices towards people of African descent, then every attention and every redress and every support to support the healing and the justice in those communities need to take place. So I'm not trying to remove that. So please don't hear that I'm trying to say, oh, there doesn't need to be any support for Black people. There needs to be no support. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if there is a system that requires you to identify as a term that was created to signify that you are less than, something is wrong with that system. I'm not saying something is wrong with you. If there is a system that says in order to get the scholarship, you have to identify as this, as a less than, because that's what the term Black in a racial system means. It's not just a descriptive term. No one is even Black anyway. So it's not descriptive. So if it's not descriptive, what is it doing then? It's describing something else. It's describing a belief about you that's not very great. So it's just something for you to think about. I think there are changes that can be made. Yes, if there are scholarships out there for Black people, if there are competitions for Black people, enter them. Enter them. But if you have a different idea about this, say your idea. Say, thank you for giving me this award for being the first Black medical student in this specialty area. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm very proud of where I've come from and what I've achieved. You can say all of those things. You don't have to because you don't identify, you don't use the word black to identify yourself, means that you don't love yourself and you're not proud of where you have made it in life, regardless of what your background is. Maybe your background could be of fortune, or your background could be of challenge. You can still talk about yourself for who you are. But what I'm saying is that what surprises me is the people that have a term to identify themselves with, which is a term of privilege. If they don't want to lose using a racial language, I can understand that, because you're losing your privilege. In that concept of race, it doesn't mean that, for example, if a person who identifies as white decides to stop calling themselves white, it doesn't mean that they will lose their white privilege. It just means that they will stop participating in perpetuating a racist system. But the privilege will be there still, because the concept will take a while to flush out and the systems will take a while to change. If that kind of makes sense, hopefully that makes sense. But what I'm trying to say is that if the people who are privileged by being in a racial system don't want it to change, I can completely understand. But the people who are disadvantaged by the racial system, who don't want to change their language and change their association with the racial system, I don't understand that. I would want to get out. I would want to get away from this racialized system. And a lot of people are trying to do that, and they are putting in effort, and they're doing great strides and great accomplishments in bringing attention to the injustices. And for those people, continue doing your work. You're doing a great job. And I also challenge you, ask yourself, do I need to identify as Black? If you say, I don't want to identify as Black anymore, you're not going to disappear from the face of the earth. You'll still be here. And it will be for you to decide how you want to identify yourself. And not you be like, well, this was pushed on me, but I'm going to turn it around and make it something that is something that I have, you know, regentrified, something that I have given a new life to. Why can't we make up our own language? People of African descent, we're very creative people. I'm sure we can come up with accurate terminology. Now, the African diaspora is very large, so maybe people will use multiple terms to describe themselves. I don't know. And will we have one word that is so descriptive that everyone agrees with and is so accurate? Or we will just have words that come close to the interpretation. For example, I identify as a person of African descent. I'm still using words from a language system that is not of African descent, right? I'm using words from a language system that's not African, but I'm describing myself as a person of African descent. So there's work, and I don't think it's impossible for us to figure out, and I think it's something that we can achieve. And I just want to reiterate, this is something for us to think about. This is not something to drive a wedge and to say anybody's better than or anybody's less than. It's not about being better than, it's not about being less than. It's about asking yourself, how do I want to identify? Why do I find the need to perpetuate racial language, but I don't want to perpetuate racial injustice? Isn't the racial injustice also encoded in the language? It is not. How so? How is it not encoded in the language? And this is another thing, racial equity. Please, there's no such thing as racial equity. Race is an inherently unjust system. So there's no such thing as racial justice or racial equity. There's no equity to having a system that was created to disenfranchise certain groups of people. It just doesn't go together. And once again, I ask people that identify as black, white, brown, there were two other colors in the past that were used to describe people, yellow and red, and those words aren't used anymore as rightly as they shouldn't. But why do we still keep using black, white, and brown? I mean, technically, in my opinion, everyone is a shade of brown, really. But I would say most people are on the spectrum of brown. Um, but these colors are so important for us to use these colorized terms. So we learn one thing in kindergarten about colors, but then when we look on a human, we have to learn a whole other system that's based on prejudice and biases and hatred. And I just don't want to perpetuate that system. And one of the ways that I don't want to perpetuate that system is to remove that language from my vocabulary. So, just an idea I wanted to share with you. Give it some thought. Let me know your ideas on it as well. And once again, this is not about hating people or dividing people. It's just posing a question that I think a lot of people have not asked themselves before. And once again, if you love yourself, you identify as black, brown, or white, love yourself for who you are. You are not black, you're not white, you're not brown, but if that's who you think you are, love yourself for who you really are. And just know that your love for yourself is not going to fade away if you don't identify as black or white or brown any longer. You think about your heritage and your ancestry. And I know that for some people, they say, well, people are going to pick another way to disenfranchise people or to discriminate against people. Most people groups, most social groups have hierarchy. This is fact. Um, I'm not saying it needs to be that way or it should be that way, but pretty much the human groups that I have learned about, they all have some kind of hierarchy. So my question is, okay, if you say that people are going to find some other way to categorize and discriminate against people, I will say, okay, even if you believe that to be true, why do you want to add one more category to it, which is race? So even if people are going to discriminate based on gender or sexual orientation or height or nationality, why do you want to add one more? Why don't we get rid of one, which is race? And I know nationality for some people can be tricky because nationality in certain parts of the country can be a debated topic based on things that, maybe land disputes or people feeling like they have nationalities that do not reflect who they truly are based on war, usually, violence, usually, politics, military, um, efforts, right? So I understand not everybody can just use their nationality as a form of identity. I understand. But I once again still feel like if you think about it, you can find other ways to describe yourself if you care. And if you don't, that's understandable as well. I just wanted to share my opinion and bring about a new concept. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. If you heard something that you liked, like the channel and also share it with someone as well. And if you're interested, please subscribe. I would also like to give a shout out to anyone that's having a birthday. Happy birthday to you. Technically, it's the anniversary of your birthday, but I want to send you birthday wishes, birthday greetings. I hope you have a wonderful birthday. I hope that your upcoming year, which is because your birthday is the start of a new year, right? Since that's the start of the day that you're born, it's the start of a new year. And I wish you many abundance of prosperity and wealth and wisdom, and for you to have an abundance of love in your life. So, happy birthday anniversary to you. I hope you have a wonderful time. Much love and blessings to all. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.